All right, so in this video, we will be discussing changing behavior. Already, you will have decided on at least one concrete action to take, usually on a daily basis, to start shifting things in your life. So this section of the program is all about understanding the scientific principles of how behavioral patterns form and what we can do to reinforce them. Now, I'm sure you've already tried plenty of times to build new habits. Maybe sometimes that's been successful, maybe sometimes that has been less successful. Maybe you're already sick and tired of the idea of morning routines or daily practices or whatever else, and that is totally fair enough. If you're lacking motivation to change, we're going to address that. If you doubt your ability to remain consistent with the behavior changes we'll suggest, we're also going to work on that too. The psychology, the emotions, the environmental conditions are all important elements to examine. But actually, one of the best ways to start to examine them is basically just to start trying to behave differently and then to see what happens. So consider this whole part of the program, this whole behavior change effort, really like an experiment, like an exploration. There's no success or failure here. Okay, that's really important. There's no pressure to perform. We're just going to stay curious and stay open to whatever happens when you start trying to concretely adjust your day-to-day life. So the principles I want to share with you in this video, and what's written below it also on the page, are taken from leading experts in behavioral change, and you can find all of the sources at the bottom of the page. By practicing all of this over the next 12 weeks, you will honestly integrate skills that will serve you for the rest of your life. And whenever you want to change the way your day-to-day looks, you can put this system to use. So, the first thing we're going to talk about is what we'll call the behavior change loop. So when you take everything else away, every behavior that you do repeatedly, that's to say, every habit that you have, runs on the same four-part loop. And the four parts of that loop are cue, craving, response, and reward. So what are each of those things? So the cue is a piece of information that predicts the reward. So it could be the smell of food that makes you imagine how good that food is going to taste. It could be the sight of the gym equipment that makes you feel already the satisfaction of having had a workout. It could be the sound of your alarm clock in the morning that already has you thinking about everything negative in your day that you don't want to face. So all of those signals are cues that prime you to expect a certain reward or a certain negative experience. Second part, craving. So this is an interesting one because the craving is like the desire for something, but the important thing is that you don't actually crave the behavior itself. What you crave is the change in state that the behavior delivers. So really, nobody actually wants a cigarette. What they want is the relief or the relaxation or the social connection that the cigarette brings them. Similarly, nobody really wants to check their phone. What they want is the distraction from their problems or the little bit of amusement, the little dopamine hit, or the social connection of talking to their friends. Third part of the loop is the response, and that is actually the behavior itself. So it's the thing that you do in response to the anticipated reward, the craving. And then finally comes the reward. So that's the experience which satisfies the craving that you built. And it's also the thing which is going to teach your brain that this first cue that started this loop is something worth paying attention to next time. So that basic loop is running all the time in our lives. And if it runs enough times on any single action, then it makes that behavior automatic and effortless. So the decision to do it or not to do it drops below the level of conscious thought. And that's probably the first important principle to understand, is that a habit is basically just a reliable way to get a reward or to escape discomfort. Reliable meaning it works every time or most times. So what that means is, if you're unable to start a new behavior or you're unable to stop an old one, it's because the way that you're currently behaving is actually helping you in some way. It's actually solving something for you. So if you want to change the way you're behaving, you have to understand that, figure out how that's working, so that you can then intervene in an intelligent way. So on the page below the video, you will find a specific tool to target every stage of the behavioral cycle: the cue, the craving, the action, and the reward. And those tools are, briefly, make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. So each one of those principles targets a specific point where habits, behavior change, succeed or fail. So we're going to go through them in a little bit more detail, starting with the make it obvious principle. And this is for engineering the cue. So it's important to understand that most habits don't fail because you lack willpower. They fail because the moment of action was never properly decided. If you're saying to yourself, I should exercise more, it's such a vague and open statement that there's never really a solid cue to act on. There's no when, there's no where. It's left to chance. And when you leave those things to chance, it's basically random if you're going to do it or not, and that's not a reliable way to start a habit. So in order to fix that, what you need to do is decide very clearly in advance, I will do the thing at this time in this place, and make it explicit. That's backed up by research. People who specify the when and the where follow through at a dramatically higher rate than people with the same intention and no plan. So the easiest version is just to attach the new behavior to something you already do without thinking. That's called habit stacking or habit chaining. So instead of saying a particular time, you can say, after I do X, I will do Y, for example. After I take a shower in the morning, I will sit and meditate for 10 minutes, for example. After I pour my morning coffee, I will journal for 10 minutes, whatever it is. There, you're not relying on your memory or your motivation. You're actually just supporting yourself with a cue that's already ingrained in your life. So that makes it a whole lot smoother. Principle number 2, make it attractive. That's targeting the craving. So this is really important, right? Many people, I think, fall into the trap of trying to force themselves to do something which ultimately is not actually attractive to them in the first place. They know it's good for them, but the experience of it is actually just not attractive. And the fact is, behaviors that are not attractive will not sustain themselves. So the way to engineer this, because not everything good for you is obviously immediately attractive, is to figure out how to pair the thing you need to do with something you genuinely want, so that they arrive together and so that the brain actually starts to anticipate the combo. So one example of this is like if you want to start doing push-ups in the morning, for example. What you could do is you could make a rule that if I do my 10 push-ups, then I will have a piece of chocolate. Very basic example, and maybe not the wisest example, because the chocolate might counteract the push-ups, but just to illustrate the point, your brain will obviously crave the chocolate, and it will start to associate the push-ups with the chocolate, which will make the push-ups more attractive, easier for you to do. That's a really important thing to try and get in place, right? There's no point forcing yourself to try and do something that just it has no pleasure, no enjoyment, no immediate upside in it. That just drains your willpower, drains your motivational system, and makes it sort of self-defeating. Craving is actually what we would say like the motivational engine of the whole loop. It's what turns your cue into an action. And if nothing in you is leaning toward the behavior, no amount of planning is going to make up for it. Principle number 3, make it easy. So this is for the response, the action. So the idea here is that you want to try and make the behavior you're actually trying to do as small, simple, and achievable as possible. When you're forming a new habit, the important thing isn't the impact that that action is having on your life immediately. The important thing is just that you are installing that in your life, making it a regular feature of your life, from which you can then build on slowly to start feeling the effect. So scale the behavior down until starting it takes under 2 minutes. The behavior is not, I will read every day. The behavior is, I will read 1 page. The behavior is not, I will go for a run every day. The behavior is, I will put on my running shoes every day. The behavior is not, I will not look at my phone all evening. The behavior is just, I will put my phone in a certain place at the start of the evening. The reason why that works is that actually the hardest part of any behavior is the transition into it. It's the friction of starting, or the starting inertia, I like to say. So a habit has to be established before it can be improved. You're not trying to do the impressive version yet. You're just trying to become the kind of person who just shows up. And of course, you want to improve that habit over time, but you can't improve a habit that doesn't exist. So just master the first 2 minutes, and the rest will tend to follow. And actually, the same principle works in reverse, and it's why removing friction is so powerful. Every step you delete between you and the behavior raises the odds you do it, and every step you add to a behavior actually lowers the odds that you will do it. So it's also useful for things that you don't want to do. You put more steps in between you and actually doing it, like putting your phone in a box and then locking the box, or actually turning off your Wi-Fi at the source. All of those intermediate steps gives you a chance to actually stop doing what you may not want to do. Fourth and final principle to consider is make it satisfying. And so this is about the reward. So the first 3 strategies get you to do the thing 1 time. The 4th strategy gets you to do it again. And here's the problem that reward solves. The behaviors worth building almost always have a delayed payoff. You go to the gym for weeks and you see not much of a result. You do something harder at work, and the recognition, if it does come, comes much later. But the brain, meanwhile, is wired to prioritize the immediate reward. So in this gap before the real benefit arrives, you need some immediate signal that this counted, right? So the chocolate from the earlier example also could function in this way as well. But actually, the most powerful rewards you can put in place are what they call intrinsic rewards rather than extrinsic rewards. So the extrinsic reward would be something that you give yourself, like a chocolate or whatever else. But the intrinsic reward is actually something that comes from within you, a feeling you generate within yourself. And at the most basic level, what that means is that when you do the thing, that you take a moment after you've done it to really feel the gratitude, the pride, the satisfaction that you did it. And actually, you can ritualize that by having a kind of a checklist or a behavior tracker, right? Every time you tick off one of the boxes, you can take that moment and say, I did it again, right? You see your streak building up, it's reinforcing, it's motivating. Or, you know, any ritual, any action like that helps you feel more satisfied with the effort you've taken is going to be reinforcing as well. There's also a really important rule that is like one of the golden rules of this whole area, and that rule is never miss twice. So of course you will miss. Everybody misses a day. Missing once, it happens, it's an accident. And actually, in terms of the science, it doesn't actually have that much of an effect. But if you miss twice in a row, that's the beginning of a new pattern. So the thing that separates people who sustain habits from people who don't is not perfection. It's how well you recover after you failed. So that's really, really important. Don't feel bad if you miss one day, because it happens to everybody. But just make sure that if you miss that one day, you redouble your motivation. It becomes your number one priority not to miss the next day so that you get back on track. So that's the behavioral loop. That's what you need to get right if you want to change the way you are operating. 2 final points just to conclude. First point is about identity. Most people approach habits from the goal. They think, I want to lose weight, I want to finish the project, I want to fix my sleep, whatever. That works for a little while, and then it doesn't. Because the moment the goal is questioned, the behavior loses its reason to exist. So the stronger approach is different to that. Every time you perform a behavior, you cast a small vote for a story about who you are. I am someone who does X. And as the votes accumulate, at some point, the evidence becomes a belief. And the belief carries the motivation through the weeks when the motivation? No. The belief carries the behavior through the weeks when the motivation is gone. So this is why we anchor habits to identity rather than goals. You're not trying to achieve something out there. You're providing yourself with evidence of who you are becoming. Second thing I want to say is about belief. Specifically, where belief comes from. So there's a consistent finding in the research on people who've changed for the long term. Change becomes believable and therefore possible when it's held within a relationship or a structure. When you see the person you're becoming reflected back at you by someone else, that's when it stops feeling like pretending, and that's when it starts feeling real. This is part of what this program is designed for. That means to give you the structure, the motivation, the guidance, the support, and the validation to reinforce the person you want to become. So that's a little bit of background on behavioral change, habit formation. Have a read through the guide just below this video. Feel free to print it out, stick it on your wall, study it, revise it, understand it well enough that the information within it can provide you with instant clarity, sort of justification and motivation for whatever change you're trying to bring about in your life. And then as we go through the program as well, as we keep looking at the behavioral changes that we're trying to bring about, we'll be using this framework to really examine exactly how it's working, and how we can be most effective in really building those new habits. So that's all for this one. Excited to see you in our next session to have a look at how you've been going with your own habit formation.